a symbol of new life because it sheds its
Shedding.
skin every year. And that's why it's on the caducee, the symbol for the medical association.
yeah, they have
right,
that there.
right.
Yeah.
So it's
Constantly
not
What did you
always a
say
bad
that was
thing.
called?
Caducee or something
Cad,
like
is
that.
that it? Cool.
It's also called the Ebenezer.
Is that what it is?
The Ebenezer.
I'm probably mispronouncing
As
it.
I read
my
the
and I don't
Ebenezer.
hear
As I raise my
Right.
Ebenezer,
Yeah.
I've
that's
never
what
heard
it is.
it.
I had a feeling, yes.
Medicine.
But the medical symbol.
Yeah, that's cool.
The Ebenezer part comes from that story of Moses, the children in the wilderness where the snakes came. And they had to make a bronze snake and put it on a stick, and every time they looked at the snake, they were healed. Officially starting, I
we're
turned on
starting.
the online thing, so welcome to those of you who are watching later, who want to follow along in our conversations about Isaiah today. This is the High Mountain Presbyterian Church. I'm Pastor Lou, and we have a few people present here today. I did not have any responses for the online streaming. If you were watching this and you were trying to come online through Zoom, just email me at revlouie, R-E-V, that's a V as in Victor, L-O-U-I-E, at AOL.com, and I will, right here, I'll turn on the Zoom and get you linked in. I sent out the link for the Zoom rather late today, so in fact, I sent it out about a minute before 10. But, okay, so here we are. I want to say that I didn't bring the book in here with me, but along with some of our thinking about, God punishing and all this, I read what I intend to immediately reread, a reflection called Lament for a Son. And it's written by a man who was a professor at, I don't know if it's Columbia, one of the Ivy League universities. He was a professor of theology and thoroughly a Christian. I mean, he makes it clear that he is and intends to continue to be a Christian. But at age 25, his son, who loved to climb mountains, fell off a mountain and was brutally killed. And he writes, to my mind, one of the most honest but helpful reflections about how he is trying to make sense out of terrible things that happen in life, always in reflection to his son Mark. And I have to say, it's been very helpful to me as a theologian, because what he does is he brings, instead of this whole issue of, like Isaiah is talking about, well, the people were bad and God was mad, and so then bad things happened to them. First of all, he argues that Isaiah doesn't believe that. He thinks that Isaiah is actually opposed to that kind of thinking, and we're going to look for evidence more so than ever that Isaiah was dead set against the sacrificial system, that he believed that that was perfunctory kind of appeasing the god of the volcano kind of stuff, and that Isaiah was rejecting that. But what this man does is, and I'm surprised because he caught me by surprise, he ends up, see if I can say it, it's my first attempt to say this, but he ends up grounding all of our theological reflection about good and evil and God and punishment and the exchanges. It all finds a wellspring of contemplation in the suffering of Jesus on the cross. And what he keeps coming back to is, as a Christian, he is thoroughly embraces the idea that Mary gave birth to God. And it's what we say we believe, that Jesus was the Son of God. And what he does is, he says that we miss the point that the Bible teaches a suffering God. A suffering God. Not just a God who, quote, sent their Son, but that God, in response to he calls it the rough and tumble world, and that relates to his son falling off a mountain. And And then he also dispenses along the way. It's a beautiful book for anybody who's grieving. It's not big, but he just dices up with a sword people who try to make sense out of his son's death by saying, well, these things, they happen, and, it wasn't God killing him. The mountain shook and he slipped. All kinds of alternative ways of understanding, and he refuses. He refuses. So in his laments, he draws from the Psalms the boldness of the psalmists to take their fist and shake it at God and to say, there are lots of things in this life that you should have fixed, that should not happen, and you cannot lay at our feet the level of suffering that goes on in the world. It's not. It's out of proportion. You look at the poor people. I keep coming back to it because, contemporary news right now presents the suffering of the people in Ukraine. You cannot lay at the feet of the 10-year-old boys and girls in Ukraine the profound suffering that is going on in the unfolding of life's histories and the powers that be here and there. You cannot do that. So he says that as Christians, we must engage, we must fully engage the embarrassing, and he ends up almost being a mystic, but the embarrassing claim of God to take on the suffering, to take it on. And you don't hear a lot of that in what we've just been through because, Nehemiah and Ezra and others like them say, well, it's bad because you're bad, But there's just too much. The proportion of suffering in the world outpaces that. I've been reading again now, can't think of the country that's entering into a new famine. There's a new famine coming. Somalia. And Somalia is ruled by drug lords, so that there's quadrants that you can move from one place to the other, but if you do, you'll be shot.
And they won't allow any of the food.
Right, they will not
aid
allow the aid to come in
to come on
because
the
it threatens their control of the people. And then you think about these children. And so this theology that we work out in nice, neat packages in places like this where, the raging struggle of the world doesn't really quite touch us. And you can hear it in I was pleased to hear another theologian who joins me in my discontent with the theologies of the 15th and 16th century.
They're the theologies of the 15th and 16th century.
Yeah, and it was nice. They were worked out in kind of the comfort of that part of the world, and they have all these neat answers to everything, and that's also where a lot of our catechisms come from, and that's where a lot of our introduction of life and the meaning of Christianity to the populace until.
There wasn't a lot of encouragement of thought
No,
in the masses.
No.
You listen to what we tell you and
No thought
accept it.
required.
Right. Leave your brain at the door.
It's all faith.
Well,
and I think
there's something to faith.
I'm not sure where it's going yet, but I always think about, my Christmas Eve sermon. I start working on it a month before Christmas Eve. And this year, given these reflections and given our work in here, I am obsessed with the words about Mary that Mary asked when the angel made the Annunciation. She said, how is this possible?
Yeah.
And it's right there. It's right there that question, how is this possible? And of course, this professor in this book goes on to talk about how is it possible that in the reality of the created world and its proportion of suffering in the world is actually quite large.
Today is the 10th anniversary of the
Sandy Hook.
Sandy Hook.
Sandy
Yeah.
Hook.
Right. So there you go. Perfect.
Did you hear the woman on NPR this morning? They had her on a couple of times. She lost her child, and then her husband worked on trying to find what caused someone to do that, And he committed suicide about 2 or 3 years ago, after they had 2 other children.
Oh.
And,
Yeah.
you know, talk about living with suffering.
Yeah, or not,
Yeah.
not able to.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
And I liked what they said too, like 26 victims
Right.
and families all require different sources of comfort.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
They all find it in different ways.
It was a day just like this, because I was driving, I drove right through Sandy Hook on 84 on my way
Wow.
up to Kelda's when it was happening, and I didn't realize it. Then I started hearing on the radio,
Yeah.
and when I got up to Manchester, I went into the house, I said, Kelda, put the TV on, let's see. And it was a beautiful sunny, it was cold, beautiful but sunny day, just like today. And it's like horrifying and beautiful at the same time, and how does the world hold both those things
Right.
at once?
Right.
That is, see, that's more honest, I think, saying that statement. How does life, how does the world hold the grief and the suffering and the torment together in the same world where there is, I mean, look outside today,
It's beautiful.
where there is beauty and there is wonder and there is astounding. And so we are in both directions. And then you talk about the people who are trying in the aftermath of experiencing intense suffering, who are trying to make what we call make sense out of it. And it doesn't make sense. It doesn't. And even, again, I'm not just using this man's words, but my own, that it doesn't make sense to God. That's the part that really flies in the face of this image of God who is before all things and after all things and omnipotent and all the rest of that. I believe in God and I'm a Christian, but I don't believe in that structure of God. I can't accept that and then still accept the rest of the teachings of Christianity, which are that in Christ, God suffered. God's suffered. This is the thing that liberation theologians throughout South America, they wrote books and books and books, and the discovery that Christianity teaches that God is suffering for us and with us. And then you go, well, that's not helpful at all.
Right.
Like, what
That
help is
gives
it
me less,
if
hope.
my Savior is suffering, you know? But at least we don't end up in the craziness of this having to rationally make sense out of something that makes no sense.
I was just looking for Greg Boyle, who wrote Tattoos of the Heart. He's a priest in, I think it's LA, and he's worked with gangs for many, many years, and he's had phenomenal success with young adults. And I read somewhere in one of his books that he said God doesn't protect us, but God supports us. So watch that, he supports us, but doesn't necessarily protect us.
Yeah, because God isn't in the world that way.
No. I'm pretty sure, Barbara, that he was one of the people I had mentioned to you that Kelly Corrigan, she
Oh, right.
interviewed him.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I
it's on
saw one of hers,
PBS.
really. I'll
was-
have to catch
yeah, it was
that, because
unbelievable.
I've read a couple of his books.
What
and
what he has done with,
Right. Mm-hmm.
and I mean, there's pictures, I mean, it's simply amazing what he's done over these years.
Mhm.
I was like, wow, I had never heard of him.
I hadn't either, and my Unitarian daughter-in-law told me she
All right.
was reading the book in their book club.
Wow, it's,
I'm probably gonna have to get up and go attend to the door in a minute. I see the ready refresh water truck has pulled up.
okay.
And we've been having a struggle with them so that we're firing them.
Oh.
I think he's come to take the water cooler today.
You're fired.
Yeah.
Oh,
You would
no.
think, You would think water, among all the commodities that we have in the world, would be the easiest
No.
product to order, set up a
Right.
schedule, and say, you know,
Right.
we'd like 5 bottles every 2 weeks.
Nope.
Yeah, look, he's coming to take the
Oh,
cooler, so I'm just gonna let him in.
Remember, he's
Sure.
just the messenger.
Yeah, oh no, I'm not mad at you.
Yeah, he already knows, right?
This is the point to be happy, because we've reached a
Oh.
decision.
Okay.
We've arrived.
It's not easy.
Sorry I was late. I hadn't used my car since last Thursday.
Was it
And I
snow
had
on it?
looked out and, yeah, oh, it looks fine, it looks fine. But I didn't see my front window, which was this thick.
With
Oh,
ice.
Ice.
gosh, there's ice under
And
it so
of course, I
bad.
don't have a scraper anymore. And I don't have any gloves.
Because you're in Florida most of this winter.
So I quick
no.
put the, I get there, so I
Put the
quick put the
dehumidif-
defroster on. But, so then I did have a tote bag and I started scrubbing. But it took a while.
Aw.
But I thought, oh, I'm finally on time. I got my swim in.
Yeah.
Well, the best
I
way-
love that you were swimming already. That's it. I think I'm so good because I was at the library.
Did he turn
Oh, no.
I don't think so. It's okay. We haven't said anything
Yeah.
really racy or anything.
It's okay.
like we have such racy
There you go.
conversations.
Yeah, don't.
I stayed up an hour later last night.
Aw.
Anyway, this is the second water company we have dealt with.
No, really?
Yeah. I don't know what it is.
Did it used to be Poland Spring?
It's still Poland Spring
Oh,
water.
all right, okay.
But this is Ready
Oh,
Refresh.
all right, okay.
And then there's, the one that we had before was just, and the pressure's not so big just for this one, but the water in North Halden for the preschool kids, we don't let them drink from
Right.
the water.
We can't drink our water
Yeah.
from Hawthorne. We can't have tap water.
And so we use about, in
Or
the
cook with it.
infant care, we use about 5 bottles a week. And when we run out,
Right?
You don't
Oh,
know.
no.
and so we just keep saying, look, this is a consistent usage, why can't you cover us?
We should be on a schedule here, yeah.
We-
No, that's
We
ridiculous.
have to go out at the grocery store, we buy bottles of water. at the
Oh,
grocery
that's so
store.
Is it a
sad.
labor problem where they don't have enough people?
It's an office problem, it's about scheduling. They forget to schedule it, and then it's also, maybe it is a labor problem, because they'll schedule a delivery, and the guy will get, or woman will get halfway there, and then turn around and go back, and the delays are up like 5 days late.
Oh, my goodness.
That's not
I
a
can't
good
even
thing.
imagine.
No, so anyway, we gave up. We're
Yeah.
gonna, we rent that cooler that's out there, but you can buy them at like Home Depot. So we're gonna buy one.
Oh, and then just fill it
Yeah,
yourselves.
and we pay $12 a bottle for that water.
Probably cheaper.
It's at Food Town, it's $5 a
Oh,
bottle.
there you go.
Really?
Yeah,
Yeah, so there,
but it's for the convenience of the
Right.
delivery. I mean, you know,
but if
somebody's-
there's nobody delivering on time, it's
That's
not
exactly
convenient, so.
right. So, anyway, sorry for the
All right.
interruption.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so we were saying, and I don't know exactly all of what's happening for me in my life, but some of it is coming out of these Bible studies, is that I feel as though these things that I have held off, and I apologize for sometimes, even from the pulpit, I'll apologize, or I offer a feigned apology of saying, look, I'm sorry if what I'm saying doesn't sound orthodox or doesn't sound right. I'm way past that now, because I realize there's a whole world of people who are waiting for a more honest rendering.
I think most mature people
Yeah.
will go, I don't want to hear that Sunday school stuff. Yeah,
Yeah, and
I've gotten
just,
a little older than that.
you know, these cheap answers,
Right.
I'm sorry, but they're cheap answers. They,
They're the anti-faith, because people start saying, well, that's not worth anything for me.
Right.
Yeah.
and then the harder question is, are we really able to stand in to the experiences of suffering? And I like this book, Lament for a Son, is that, again, I can't say it, I'm going to have to read the book 10 times over. But basically what he's saying is that until you stand completely in the suffering, you'll never understand what the Bible writers are talking about, the rise of the light in the darkness. Until the darkness perplexes you, until it turns you inside out and makes you vomit and you are, in some ways, lost in the darkness, then, and in that setting, and this is the mystics that talk about this a lot, the mystics, the mothers and fathers, the Abbas of the desert, they talk about this experience of finding the surprise of love and life and light in the darkest experiences of all. But it's not a journey of the mind that says, oh, look at this, I finally found what I was doing wrong, and now I can change it, and then, or the advice of, good-willed people who stroll past Job and say, sorry to see you suffering, Job, but
What
boy,
did you do?
you must have really done something to make God angry, right?
Oh my gosh, yes.
Yeah, no.
And the thing is, that is such a superficial answer. It's just,
I so agree. I'm just sitting here thinking about our one Bible study when somebody made a comment and said, boy, what did you do to make God so angry with you? I don't know that I recovered for the next half hour, to tell you the truth. I kind of was gone. I thought, oh boy.
and early in my ministry, one of the shaping experiences of my life, I had become good friends with a man who was a grief counselor. We were good friends. He played the ukulele, and we didn't live too far from each other, and we became friends, but he was a grief counselor. And I learned how he became a grief counselor was that his son, who was 9, was playing in their front yard of their house in Hopewell, and a drunk driver, right about this time of year, coming home from a work Christmas party in a pickup truck, swerved off the road and ran over his son. And, hit him and catapulted him into the air. And he tells the story that with the awfulness of that, with its unthinkable horribleness, his mother was there, his wife was there, like all of that. The only thing he remembers, really, that actually remembers from that day, is that his son is there, all the flashing lights and everything, and he looked up, and coming across the yard, walking across the yard, was his best friend. And he talked about that profound response in the middle of the worst. And it doesn't sound like it would be, a salve, or it didn't make him feel better. That's not the point. But it was something alongside this and then this, this and then this. And, it's, I don't know, it's a lesson I've learned in my own life. I have experienced that. And you've heard me say, and many of you have said as well, just don't say a word.
Right.
You don't, these things are not addressed through words. They are not. It's not through rational thoughts, all things work together, for those that
It's
love the
so
Lord.
hard not to feel you have to do
Yes.
and not be.
Yes.
Just be with the person, and it's very difficult, but you want to fix it all the time.
And,
Well, I do.
and sometimes, life is so damn unpredictable, because sometimes there are things you can do. And if you're patient, and you're not driven by your need
Right,
to do
right.
those,
Right?
then those things
To
become,
hear it.
yeah, those things
Hear
become
what
obvious.
is needed to do.
And then you have the added gift of being able to be in the world, aware of the profound pain that comes into people's lives in meaningless ways. And then you can actually apply, what is it, the balm of Gilead. You know, there is miraculously tiny thing that can be done, or a word that can be said if invited. But mostly, is standing with. And I think all of that, I'm saying all of that because I think that if we listen carefully, that's what Isaiah does. Even though, in some of what we've read, he sounds like he's like these superficial people who say, well, you know, you did bad, now I can see on the horizon something good is coming. So I want to challenge us to listen for what's new about Isaiah.
Right.
What's different about his approach to this struggle or this problem of the struggle of the people.
Wow.
9?
Yes.
Okay, he jumps right into our conversation. Look at his
He
words.
left us in the gloom and
He
doom, I
did, but
mean,
look,
you know.
But look what he says
Oh,
right in
all
the
right.
first sentence.
Oh,
Right.
look, yeah.
Okay.
All right, who's reading?
I guess it's me.
Somebody jump in.
But there will be no gloom for those who were in anguish. In the former time, he brought into contempt the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali. But in the latter time, he will make glorious the way of the sea, the land beyond the Jordan, Galilee of the nations. The people who walked in darkness have seen a great light. Those who lived in a land of deep darkness, on them light has shined. You have multiplied the nation, you have increased its joy. They rejoice before you as with joy at the harvest, as people exult when dividing plunder. For the yoke of their burden and the bar across their shoulders, the rod of their oppressor, you have broken as on the day of Midian. For all the boots of the tramping warriors and all the garments rolled in blood shall be burned as fuel for the fire. For a child has been born to us, a son given to us. Authority rests upon his shoulders, and he is named Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. His authority shall grow continually, and there shall be endless peace for the throne of David and his kingdom. He will establish and uphold it with justice and with righteousness from this time onward and forevermore. The zeal of the Lord of hosts will do this. The Lord has sent a word against Jacob, and it fell on Israel. And all the people knew it, Ephraim and the inhabitants of Samaria. But in pride and arrogance of heart they said, the bricks have fallen, but we will build with dressed stones. The sycamores have been cut down, but we will put cedars in their place. So the Lord raised adversaries against them and stirred up their enemies. The Arameans on the east and the Philistines on the west. Arameans. And on the east and the Philistines on the west. And they devoured Israel with open mouth. For all this, his anger has not turned away. His hand is stretched out still. The people did not turn to him who struck them, or seek the Lord of hosts. So the Lord cut off from Israel head and tail, palm branch and reed in one day. Elders and dignitaries are the head, and prophets who teach lies are the tail. For those who led this people led them astray, and those who were led by them were left in confusion. That is why the Lord did not have pity on their young people, or compassion on their orphans and widows, where everyone was godless and an evildoer, and every mouth spoke folly. All this his anger has not turned away. His hand is stretched out still. For wickedness burned like a fire, consuming briars and thorns, kindled the thickets of the forest, and they swirled upward in a column of smoke. Through the wrath of the Lord of hosts, the land was burned, and the people became like fuel for the fire. No one spared another. They gorged on the right, but still were hungry. And they devoured on the left, but were not satisfied. They devoured the flesh of their own kindred. Manasseh devoured Ephraim, and Ephraim Manasseh, and together they were against Judah. For all this, his anger has not turned away. His hand is stretched out still.
Well,
There is some hope in that.
yeah, there's hope. Boy, I don't even know. You got to sort out a lot of words as you're reading this, Barbara. I mean, what?
I guess we kind of focus, or I do, just on what I want to hear, like the people who walked in darkness have seen a great light. The
We love
aha
that.
moment.
That's right. Now those people will see a great light.
And I have talked about how some of the scholars say, again, this whole thing of sequence, who's first and who's
Right.
last.
Uh-huh.
Like, where is Cyrus and the prophecies of Cyrus about this? This commentator says that Isaiah sees the coming of a new king. And it's perhaps, he says, maybe Hezekiah, the son and successor of Ahaz. It signals a new period of peace, justice, and righteousness. But the vision of Isaiah, let's say, so here I want to say, boy, I love your poetry about those who walk in darkness have seen a great light. But do you really want the kingdom of David to come back?
Well,
Do you really want, I mean, when David announced peace the same way the Romans did. Pax Romana, peace over all of Rome.
at a heavy hand.
Yeah. Just,
Whose piece?
yeah, I mean, you know, there was no war because David had killed everybody. And so is that really the vision? Is that it? Are we just done with learning the lessons of Solomon and David and the model of their kingdom? Yes. I mean,
David is, no matter what, is still held in high esteem.
The apple of God's eye.
And it is, with reverence that people talk, even Isaiah, I guess,
Yeah.
about David and David's lineage. And, I can't tell you why. A lot of the stuff that we read just makes no sense, but
And it's like negative. Like right after, like here where it says, but they will see a great light, the people live in darkness, they will see a great light, and, blah, blah, blah. Then right after that, it goes on and it says, it will be like the joy of people taking what they have won in war.
Yeah.
well,
You're like, okay, is that really
That's
joy?
right.
That's
Yeah.
not what I think of as
it's a
joy.
cultural thing at that point, I
Yeah,
guess.
I mean, joy. I mean, I think of, like, I don't know, I always think happiness is so fleeting, but, joy can remain. Like, you can always have, like,
This,
Yeah,
it also
I like
says to
joy.
me, this is written by human beings,
right.
for human beings. We are human.
Mm-hmm.
We make mistakes. We have misunderstandings. And it's also old. We understand some things differently. Maybe in some ways we're far worse, but in some other ways we seem to think of ourselves as enlightened beings.
Really love
But then the world kind of shuffles along the same, with the same sufferings, the same wars, the same brother against brother, and
And still always trying to figure out why.
why,
Uh-huh.
exactly. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
We learn nothing.
Except that there are people who do come with a word of comfort. And I think actually under all of this, that's what Isaiah is trying to do.
He does try to provide a word of comfort. And the metaphor he uses, which is, I just don't know how many real life experiences people had of overwhelming joy. Like, so you might think, well, would it be overwhelmingly joyful for you to win, $1 billion in the lottery? I'm not saying that's a good thing,
Right,
but
I
you
know.
would imagine that is like a pinnacle, like you would think, ignorance abounds, and I think that
Not on
that's
my bucket
why,
list.
I think that's why this image of what's the most joyful these people have ever been.
Maybe when they had children or
Right,
something.
right.
But for them, it's when there was a battle, right? And the battle is over, and they won the battle, and now they have all the possessions that they never had to work for. I mean, Israel, as a nation, is wealthy beyond belief before this desolation, and they are wealthy because of the spoils of war.
Israel, not the people,
Right,
but the
Nation.
bureaucracy.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, there you go.
The temple, the king, and all the courtiers, well, yeah.
So it's all relative. I get what you're
Yeah.
it
saying.
is,
I
and so
see.
this is an image, this is a metaphor for when are you
Right.
most happy? Well, the people have danced in the streets when David won wars and the soldiers came home with the spoils of war.
Yeah, well-
The bounty and the plunder of all that, like,
They didn't get a chance to enjoy wealth because they were sent right out for the next
Right.
war.
right, and they were probably too busy grieving the loss of their sons
right.
who died in the battles.
So why isn't there a narrative that survived where because they probably couldn't write, the average people said, this is a whole lot of hooey, because we're not happy about the outcomes of these wars. We're very unhappy. We don't like what's happening to us. It's a hard and horrible way to live. We're writing some other alternative, but they can't write.
Right, they can't
Did
write,
they
Right.
and
or
Right.
their writings wouldn't have been collected anyways. I mean, there
they're
probably were people who were expressing all of this alternative thought, but here we are talking about the official book.
Right.
This is the book, this is the record book, and Isaiah, as a prophet, grew in power and fame. He did. He was a very powerful speaker, at least in the first Isaiah, as they refer to him, because this happens in a period of time. I still think that this is in reference to, as they say, maybe the new king Hezekiah. There was still hope that the old model of Israel is going to be reunited again, north and south, and we are once again going to be the light of life that everyone in the world is going to be drawn to because of our incredible culture of generosity and all. I mean, there's this fantasy hope.
In the meantime, the farmers out there, just leave me alone and let me just
grow
grow a
my-
crop, have a couple of kids,
That's right.
leave me alone.
So when did verse 6 through whatever
Oh, yeah.
start to be Jesus and not Hezekiah?
Oh, it's obvious, doesn't that, yeah.
Well,
Make
I
it
think,
however you
I
want.
think, you've asked a question I'm not prepared for, but I think this language, a child has been born for us, gets catapulted into the first century by the writers of the Gospels.
It's almost word for word.
Yeah, they take these
Hezekiah,
words
yeah.
and they say, look, you got to understand Jesus, Luke especially, who goes back and creates the backstory of Jesus. And in his creating the backstory of Jesus, we forget sometimes that he has an agenda. Luke wants everybody to understand that Jesus and the Jesus people, the people of the way, are the new Jerusalem. He is arguing that they are Jewish through and through, and good writers have said neither Jesus nor the Christians, as they came to be called, neither Jesus nor his followers or the disciples ever intended to be the authors of a new religion.
Of course not.
And you see them battling for it when the proof texting that they do, they go back to the Hebrew scriptures. And they grab
This is the
scriptures
proof.
like this.
This is
That's
the
right.
proof.
That's the
Right.
proof. Like, and he'll be like, doesn't this sound familiar? Look, here's the story of Jesus. I'm not making this up. I got this right from Mary. I got this from Mary. Luke says that.
Yeah.
He says she had all these things in her heart. So she tells the story. There's your authority for the witness. And look at this. Look what happened. And especially when you get this, you know, the word virgin in the other young woman, which is an entirely different context. But Luke is doing this. He's like thumbing through the index cards. Oh, look at this one. This
Yep.
is an authentication. This gives us a ring of truth, as C.S. Lewis said.
Right.
Luke argues that Jesus and his whole story is a ring of truth from words that have been said and read in the ancient scriptures. The question then becomes, what does it matter? Or does it matter what the writer Isaiah was actually talking about? Does it matter?
Yes.
Well, I think it matters.
I do too.
And okay, you
Not in
can,
the way that we've twisted it, you know.
and I think that there's not,
We're saying what is Isaiah,
Yeah.
is what Isaiah, but if you take something out of context,
Yeah.
that's the historical context, is Isaiah writing it about Hezekiah.
or is he writing about Cyrus? Is he?
Right,
But-
yeah,
so-
but the time, that
Right.
time, what was going on then.
And then I don't think we have to throw Luke and Matthew under the bus. I think we can acknowledge that Luke and Matthew, they're hearing something from rabbinical school. They're hearing in the story that's unfolding right in front of them. They're hearing the echoes of their own history, and they are having aha moments. I don't take that away from them.
No.
I don't think they're intending to make up a story, but we have to be careful that we don't, as a Hebrew professor who taught Hebrew to us with a rabbi said, he really wishes that Christians would stop treating Jewish people as if they didn't get Jesus because they're just stupid. Like,
Right, they didn't
here it
see the
is. It's like,
signs.
yeah, what, you didn't, what, you had all these scriptures and you still didn't get it? Like,
Right.
it's just anti-Semitism. And there's a lot of work going on right now throughout all of the, I don't know, sort of some circles of Christianity that are trying to root out this anti-Semitism, which has invaded our reading of scriptures. It's not fair. It's not true.
Is it really that important that Jesus has to be of the lineage of David? I would, in light of what we've talked about, I would
Hope
say,
not.
I don't want to be associated with those old
Not that
kings.
DNA.
I'm a different kind of a king, and I have a different message. I'm not going for, let's amass a bunch of wealth and conquer a lot of people. I'm going for, how do you make peace with God? How do you make peace in your own life? How do you treat other people with justice and love? That's a far cry from what David was doing. Why would you want to associate yourself with David? But Jesus did not write the scriptures either.
No, he did not.
And he would have had a very, very different story had he been privileged to write that.
Yeah, and
Wouldn't that be a book?
And notice, I mean, okay, we, especially this time of year, our ears and eyes are full of the story of Matthew and Luke. John didn't tell any of that story.
Yep.
John didn't have any need to connect Jesus to David or the kingdoms or anything. John says a light was shone in
There
the
you go.
darkness. You know, it's
Darkness could
Jesus
not comprehend
arrived,
it.
and then you look
You
at
still can't.
Mark doesn't know anything about the stories of the birth of Jesus or of his lineage or anything. He literally says, there was this man named John the Baptist who, by an act of God, called human race into a time of repentance and the need to start over. Let's begin again. It's ground to a halt. And people loved it. They came and they came and they came. And then, out into the wilderness walked a man named Jesus. Oh, that's right. He's a cousin.
I was going to say, there is a little
He's
bit.
a cousin.
Yeah, we got
He's
that.
a cousin of Jesus.
Well, he
And-
actually was, wasn't he?
yeah, he was. I mean, in the
Elizabeth.
gospel telling of it,
Yeah.
Elizabeth, the mother of
That's
John,
right.
was a cousin of Mary. Right, so there is that linkage. But all this Jesus reading of the Hebrew scriptures,
Backstory.
Didn't John leap for joy in Elizabeth's
that was the
womb?
story.
Well,
That
Right,
That's one
I
of the-
just,
That's
when
the
you said that, I
folklore.
was
That's
thinking,
right.
yeah, right,
and Elizabeth says
Yeah.
to Mary,
uh-huh,
the child in me leapt for joy
right.
when you arrived. Now, can I also tell you that story, and I mean story, not true or false, just story, that story was powerful in the first century because there was a great crisis. A great crisis, and we don't talk about it much. John the Baptist had a much larger following than Jesus. Much larger. Remember at the cross? Remember how many people were there to testify? Even Peter disavowed knowledge or association with it. That never happened with John. John's followers were in every town. They were in every village. And there were rumors that following John was the leading, that John was the new Elijah, and that he was going to lead them either before he died, but also after he died. There was talk that he would himself be resurrected.
Right. That's
So-
where the resurrection stuff came
Right.
in. And it just got shifted, I think, to Jesus.
Well, and the gospel writers were responsible
Right.
for the shift. And so they tell that story. It's so important that John leapt for joy in the presence of Jesus. Because the point they're trying to make is, you followed John, but remember, John said there was one who was going to come after me who is greater than I am. It's important to know that, can I say it? It was religious, but it was political. There was that struggle that was going on. Who was going
To be
to,
the successor of this
Yes.
movement.
right, was Jesus going to be, with his followers, the successor of the John movement, which is massive. And in fact, if you read into the book of Acts, you find that, I mean, there was a lot of the unification that took place, especially after Pentecost, and the church spread its message, and the church had massive followers throughout all of Canaan and then all the way north and east and west down to Africa. It spread like wildfire, this message of love and inclusivity. But Peter runs into a group of people in the book of Acts who don't know anything about Jesus. They're followers of John. And they talk with them and they say, have you met our Jesus? And they go, we don't know nothing about no Jesus.
Right.
But then, in the miracle of Acts, describing what I don't know what they're describing, the Spirit of God comes upon the followers of John in that setting, and they speak in tongues. So they are joined to the Pentecost day, when all of the languages and people of the world were united together in this call to be Jesus followers. And they were called the people of the way. The way of Jesus. And, I gotta stick this in, they were not following Jesus. Jesus' followers were not following him. And they were not proclaiming him as, the rabbi of their lives. Jesus said, unless you, it's quoted in the Greek as saying, I am the way. And again, I feel like just a little tiny voice out in the wilderness like John, it's not what it says. It says, the way that I walk is the way. And unless anyone follows in the way that I walk, they will never come into the presence of God.
That's closer to the Islamic understanding of stay on the straight path, that all the prophets came to guide you. They didn't say you have to believe in me.
That's right.
It was always, you must believe in God, and to do that, follow my example. I've been sent as someone to guide you, a guide. That's- But, John was a lot more, I always thought of John in the past as this dude that baptized a few people and met up with his cousin for, a special baptism, and then we don't really, but we forget that he was a political figure that was important enough to be jailed and then to be executed by the highest powers in the land.
Right.
You don't get to be that if you're just some schmo baptizing a few people. He had political power and a big following, and
In the story of
he
John,
was a rabble-rouser.
well, he was, but he was liked by Herod.
Until,
Herod liked him.
Until the wife.
He liked him until Herod married his brother's wife. And John wouldn't keep quiet about it.
right.
He was like,
It's like Macbeth.
yeah, and John's point is, how are we going to clean up the corruption?
If-
And if you, Herod, at the highest office, disregard all of our traditions that protect women, and you cast her aside, and then you cast him aside, your brother, and you marry his wife.
Which was actually done in Hebrew custom.
Yes.
But that was after
But-
they died.
Yeah, I thought that was.
But you're not supposed to cause the death.
Right, you're not supposed to.
It's not Macbeth, but you know what?
Close.
I think John gets attention only when he gets very political, when he stands up and speaks to power. That's what power doesn't like. You can go out and have any kind of revival meeting you want, but until you start saying something about the powers that be and making people think, well, maybe we should change this system, then you're in trouble. And
Yeah.
that's what happened to him.
Because even his words criticizing Herod alone would not have gotten him arrested. It was the size of the crowd that was following him. He was enormously popular. Popular enough that an uprising could have come to overthrow Herod.
Then
But-
you're dangerous.
But
Yeah.
Herod was captivated by John until
Until he wasn't.
he wasn't. And even then, even when he was in prison, he put him in prison to limit his power. But then there's the story of his wife,
There's always got to be a
who,
woman.
I know, but she was threatened. She didn't like the
Blame it
fact
on
that
the
their
woman.
marriage, the legitimacy of their marriage had been called into question. And then arrives this sordid story of her beautiful daughter who dances in front of him, and then he is enamored now by his stepdaughter and says, "You are so beautiful, I'll give you whatever you want."
Yeah.
And the daughter says,
Didn't
goes to her
Colette
mother
say-
and says, what shall I ask for?"
Yeah. Didn't Colette say, well, what's with the covering of the hair? Well, that's it. Women are the enticers. They make men do these
Yes,
terrible
they
things.
do.
Men are not capable of doing these awful things on their own. It has to be a woman that's, sly and acting behind the scenes. And sometimes women do that because we're not carrying spears usually. There were a few stories, but, women get this role to play. If you don't blame it on God, then it has to be a woman.
Gotta
That
be women.
manipulator.
Yeah, I don't know. It's disappointing, but what can you do?
And I don't know, I want to believe that I see signs of change. You know, I fought, really viciously fought early on in my ministry on these issues of how women are thought of, and because I had 3 daughters.
That'll do it.
You know, when you have
Yeah.
daughters who
When
are
you're
coming out
a
into the
girl
world,
dad.
and like I just reject entirely the image of women and what women are and what they can do. So, you know, I got 3 daughters that play soccer, and they play soccer in a way that you don't really want to mess with them. It's not, you know, they're violent on the soccer field. You know, they're within the rules. But I don't know. It really stirred my heart to begin to think differently about what the culture says to women, about women, and for women in the world. And I don't know. This text, it's timely because Isaiah is grabbed by Christian theologians who want to believe that there is this thing of prophecy, of future telling, fortune telling. And they prove the fortune telling. There are books out there that say, you know, 648 prophecies in the Old Testament that were fulfilled in the New Testament.
I've seen that.
I know you know, it depends on who you're listening to, who is interpreting. The words, even in the passage we read last night about Nehemiah, there were interpreters
Yes.
standing. So the words were read, but they needed all these interpreters. And
That's
I
right,
wonder,
that's right.
how did they interpret the words? What were they saying to the crowd that might have, you know, misconstrued perhaps, or gave a different slant than maybe the original intent was? And I think this is what happened in Islam with women. Because originally, if you read the text, it doesn't say a lot of the stuff that people say it says. It just does not say that. And I'm not an Arabic speaker, but I know enough now to see some of the original Arabic. It's not, the words can be interpreted one way or another, and it came to give people more rights, not fewer. And somehow, look at some of these nations today that, you know, like Iran we were talking about, they're interpreting the same scriptures that said, you know, a lot of stuff about equality, and making it, no, this equality only so far, and this is how women are, this is how men are, and we're going to tell you how you have to behave because it's for the good of society, and God said so. And it's the same thing that's happening here. I mean,
I'm glad you reminded me of that, because it's an amazing story, right? Ezra is looking for authority, and lo and behold, they find the original law. They
Right.
find it. They found these books, and they get all excited about, we found the books.
We got
Then
the
they
authority.
read the books in
Yep.
public, and the meaning of them is lost entirely on the people. They don't know what it means. So along come hundreds and hundreds of interpreters who get up, like preachers, they get up on great description. They get up on raised platforms, and they begin to speak out to the people. Well, they're not reciting law anymore. They're now reciting the interpretation of the law. And this is still a reality today. It's why, for all it challenged me about the Presbyterian Church, the belief of the Presbyterian Church was you were not allowed to get up and speak and preach the Bible until you had gone through the rudiments of proper training, until you had learned the language, until you could read, at least partially, read Greek, until you could read the Hebrew. Because, and I'm just going to say this, for whatever good that did for the periods of time in the existence of the Presbyterian Church, that's all gone now. It's gone even among our churches, because it used to be a church that was looking for a pastor, Presbyterian, couldn't even look at the resume, if you will, of a Presbyterian pastor who had not been to a Presbyterian seminary, who had not gone 3 years of graduate school after college, and then also had studied at least 1 year of Hebrew and 1 year of Greek. Well, guess what? If you were to take a sample of the 100 Presbyterian churches that are in our presbytery, you will find only the older pastors have done that. Now, I sat with committees, search committees, and pleaded with them to say, okay, I know you like the way this person speaks. I know they're friendly. I know they're younger. But you don't yet understand what you're welcoming into that raised platform in terms of their lack of willingness to try to understand the original message. It's gone. It's gone. And now, I get it. We should have made that education more accessible, but there are all these Bible colleges. You go to Bible college. My dad graduated from Bible college, so I'm not prejudiced against them. But when they go to Bible college, they learn somebody else's rubric of how to interpret the Bible. And it doesn't match. It doesn't match what the Bible actually says.
I don't like to pick on Catholics, sorry, former
Quite
Catholics.
all right.
But isn't what you guys were taught, you weren't really reading the Bible very
No.
much.
Oh, no.
No, the
You were
Bible was
listening
Oh,
to the
never.
priest.
I mean,
And-
during Mass, the gospel was read and, an epistle, but we never did the Bible.
You never
No.
read a Bible story book,
Yeah.
but it was
Right.
not the Bible.
No.
It was,
So was that
They-
the priests were afraid for the people to actually read it themselves, or do you think
that
they just?
people
Yeah,
weren't
They weren't.
knowledgeable.
Right.
They were not
Maybe at one
educated
time they
at one time.
probably couldn't, but, you know.
I bought myself a Bible, I think, when I was 12 years old, and that was like heresy. It was
I-
a Catholic Bible.
I had
There
the Catholic
was
Vulgate
a Ca-
also.
Catholic Bible.
Because I was interested, my
but-
parents got me a Vulgate, so, which was, nobody else in my family
You
wanted.
see
read-
that-
You read through the Gospels, I don't see anywhere where it says Jesus said, now women will not be able to,
Right.
to follow in my footsteps,
Right,
only
right.
men, because I'm a man.
Right.
Jesus didn't say that. So
Yeah.
where are they getting it? Well, they're getting it from
It's all political.
folks who want,
I-
But see,
The
the
men.
Roman Catholic, to be fair, the Roman Catholic Church never said the Bible was authoritative.
That's
They have
true.
not.
That's true,
They
you're right.
never argued that the Bible was
Yeah, that was a
authoritative.
Protestant thing.
The authority of the church rested in
more.
Jesus, and when Jesus died, he turned to Peter
Right, so
and
the
said
Pope-
to
Now
Peter,
you are the rock.
you are the
It's
authority.
Catholic.
Peter the runner.
Right, so what happens, what grows up alongside the Bible, in a really bizarre way, in the first, 1,000+ years, is they didn't care what the Bible said. The Bible was not the book.
Yeah, that's true.
The book was the tradition. And the tradition, as long as the tradition could be traced back through the bishops and the elders and the council, it was the church was led by people, not a book. It was led, and in some ways they were right, and it's still right, because a book doesn't help you. The book, the written law, doesn't help. Your story from last night. It takes people to interpret it. So in the 14th, 15th century, when Gutenberg invented the printing press, and he was going to make the Bible available to everybody, even some of what became the Protestant people said, this is not good.
Well,
Because
you were a heretic.
yeah.
If you had a Bible, you could be executed.
But the reason it wasn't good was because, and you can get their readings, because it will be the multiplication of spurious ideas with no foundation whatsoever. Because you talk about you got a Bible, and there's lots of people who have a Bible. And I don't mean to be arrogant. I put myself in this group to begin with. You can't read the Bible. You can't understand it. You cannot. It is, I've started including in our worship thing again, the prayer for enlightenment, because the truth is really the truth about the Bible. It's one thing to think that it's an inspired written word, but along with that has always been the idea that unless you pray for the Spirit to enlighten you, without the Spirit's guidance, you'll never know what it means. And then in the world we live in, with people who don't read, they just want a short, they go, okay, you know what, I don't really need these words. I'll just pray for the Spirit. And the Spirit will come and speak to me directly. And if you don't think that that is the authority of the massive of the populous church, you haven't paid attention. There are lots of preachers in the pulpit right now that have a Bible in their hand, but they're ready to tell you, almost to the same level of Isaiah himself, what God told them last night. And what God is telling them about what's going on in the world. What God is speaking directly to them to tell them, this is what we need to do, and this is what's afoot out there in the world. And so, I go, well, Christianity has left a text behind a long time ago. They're not really interested in it. It's too hard. It's too hard to understand.
And if I find you decide that you are part of a community and you've got some kind of a charismatic leader who's telling you something, and all of a sudden something just doesn't seem right to you, if you open your mouth, you're out of the community. So people probably tend not to want to do that.
It's because the whole idea of if your authority rests on a dream you had last night and God spoke to you, and the community likes you.
That's revelation.
I know.
Yeah.
But the community accepts you and likes you. You have the charisma to win a following, right? But it's the leader who is teaching that has a fundamental insecurity inside them, because you cannot have people questioning that because you can't verify it. So those communities tend to be very controlled in terms of your permission to be able to question the leader. Because if you question the leader, you might say, really? Did God actually tell you that last night? Why don't you tell me what you had for supper? You know? And how did that affect your dream that you had? You can't have that break out.
More gravy than a grave.
Yeah, you can't have that happen.
Yeah.
And then, along the fringes of these communities, large and small, some of them are very small, with that authority at the center of a God-given leader who speaks God's word to the community, that as you live, you learn around the fringes of it, there are people who've been spun out.
Yeah.
People who broke away, or people who did ask, people who did question, and found out, oh, so this community isn't really based on objectivity and something, a certainty, right? We talked about that in the very beginning. This community is not really based on certainty. This community is based on don't ask.
Yeah.
Don't ask.
I got to a point where I felt I was listening to the gospel of hate. That's honestly how I felt.
I think the gospel of hate is alive and well.
I mean, Sunday after Sunday, and you know, it got to the point where I felt terrible after church, after service. And, you know, it was so funny, I had a wonderful conversation with that lovely young lady who came, her husband Derek
Yes.
and Amy.
Right, Amy and Derek.
Yeah,
Mhm.
because we did, like, we would talk a lot in fellowship, and she, like, understood that. She said, because she hears something so different from you.
Yeah, from me.
Yeah, no, that's what she.
I know.
No,
I'm
do you
just
know,
saying.
no, but she felt like, and that's what I said, you know, I knew you first as the pastor of the church, but sort of like in a working situation, and I mean, it was wonderful, like, and I can remember Tina O'Shea saying, oh, it's really a very good preacher.
Well,
Because she worked with us for a while
Right.
downstairs.
That's the danger of
Yeah.
somebody who is really dynamic. They may have these giant
Charismatic,
followings.
right.
You know, and I always go back to Islam because that's kind of what I know. But when the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam died, the community was in an uproar. They were all upset. Of course, they're upset because somebody died. what's going to happen now to this new movement, this new Islam? What's going to happen to us? And Abu Bakr, the successor, eventually to Muhammad, stood up and said, if you were worshiping Muhammad, then you are lost.
Mhm.
If you were worshiping God, we have the
He's
way.
Right.
There's nothing that you need, we can be sorry that we lost someone we loved, but we're not worshiping that person. And I think that's kind of the danger of having a movement with a real charismatic figure. Because once that figure dies, there's a real possibility that the movement goes away because people don't know what to do.
Yeah, I mean, it's,
Sometimes that's okay. I was just
Well.
sitting here thinking of a couple of people, Debbie.
Well, but they have followers who love
You know
them and
those
follow
TV
them, and-
evangelists? You know,
Yeah.
they had
but
huge,
it's also, you don't have to go out to the TV evangelists. It's still,
Right. Yeah, local.
even in my own ministry, I have had to always be aware, like, you move into a community, like there's a seduction to it, because I've always been able, I can stand up and speak, and people like to hear me talk, and they're attracted to me. Can I say that? People are. I know this. And so, I moved into took this position, this one church. It was dying. It was down to like 100 people, 50 people, great big cathedrals, property and everything. And I was there. I wasn't there 3 years, and all of a sudden the sanctuary is full. People are coming out of the woodworks, the programs are back running again, and people think, wow, you're really amazing. And then, of course, when you leave,
Yeah.
it's not good, because I don't want to believe that people, are coming to the church because of me. But the reality is, that happens.
Mhm.
And then when I leave, they all go, sorry, I'm not going there. I just last night, from one of the churches I've served, this still happens all the time. A young woman, 24, is getting married. And so she emails me, and she says, do you remember me? I'm like, yeah, I remember you. She goes, well, I remember you, and I don't like our pastor.
Oh,
And so I'm just wondering, would you be willing to come back to that church and do my wedding? I'm like, wait, you crazy? Like, really? You think that's what's going on inside of me, that I think
Wow.
I'm irreplaceable? I get it. You have a romantic idea. Like, teenagers in my youth group used to imagine that they met me, they liked me as a youth pastor, and so they're like, when I get married,
have to.
I'm gonna have him. And the other part where it happens is, when I did finally leave some churches, the people I heard from were people who would come into my office and they would cry and they would say, but I imagined you would be doing my funeral.
Oh,
I want you to do my funeral. Will you come back and do my funeral? No. And so
And guess what? You won't know.
That's right. I know, that's right. You won't be there anyway. But that's a tension that
am.
is in all of this from Nehemiah, when people stand up on boxes and begin to explain, and especially if they're good at it. If they have a broad appeal, all of a sudden the work, which is, can God speak to us? Can God lead us? Is God present among us? Gets lost in the humanness of it all. It just does.
I don't think that you can avoid that.
No, you can't. But you can keep yourself, this is the lesson to pastors, you can keep yourself in communities of people who aren't so enamored by you, by other clergy.
That's true.
You
Oh.
keep yourself in a circle of humanity, people who are also inclined to feel that way, and then, you get a reality check from time to time. That's important.
I like it when people in authority say, this is what this means, but I might be wrong.
Right.
oh my goodness, that
Because
is
that
such,
shows a bit
Oh.
of
Exactly.
humility and compassion
wonderful
for
thing
other
to be able
people's
to admit
points of
that.
view, and they don't feel a need to be right all the time, which I think, here I'm going to cast aspersions on, there's an awful lot of imams in the masjid, that think that they have or at least that's the way they preach. And in evangelical churches too, we think that there is no other way to think about
Because
something.
people want it black and white. They
It's
don't
easier,
want
I
you to
guess.
think
Yep.
about it.
When my
It is.
model for preaching and teaching and Bible study has always been, I am engaged in a struggle for understanding, and it's real. And what I do when I preach, and people often say this, we really appreciate you sharing your struggle. You share the struggle you have. If I arrive at a place where I'm confident in something, I go, well, for now,
For now.
this is where I'm
Today.
at for now. This is where I'm, but I'm also still struggling. I'm struggling with this. That's why I said my Christmas Eve sermon is going to focus on Mary going, how can this be? How can this happen? I don't know what you're talking about, but you know what? Okay, I'm up for it. All right, we probably should end. We got more groups
Amen.
coming and going. Thank you for being here today. I didn't get any
Thank you, Pastor.
people from the, all right, and I'm also saying goodbye to those of you who have come back around and are watching on the live stream. Appreciate your following and listening. Don't forget, you can write questions or you can send comments to my email or to the church's email, and we're glad to have them. Okay. On to the next.
What do you,